That sounds perfect. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sun climb higher over the valley. The storm had washed everything clean. The world looked new. Possibilities, like the first day of something that had been waiting to begin. "I should pack," she said. "How?" She didn't move. Arthur turned to her. In the morning light, with the jacket loose around his shoulders and his white hair catching the gold, he looked like someone she could love for the rest of her life. Which was strange, because she already had. "Ilara." "Yes." "Before you go." He hesitated. For the first time since she'd arrived, he looked uncertain. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." Took a breath. Let it out slowly. "If you could go back, if you could stand on that road 50 years ago and make the choice again, would you stay?" The question landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading outward, touching everything. She thought about it. Really thought about the life she had lived, the husband she had loved, the daughter she had raised, the grandchild she held twice a year, the ordinary moments and quiet joys, and all of it built on the foundation of a choice she made when she was 25 years old. "Okay," she said finally. Arthur's face didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. A door closing, maybe, a hope dying, but she wasn't finished. "I wouldn't stay," she continued, "because if I stayed, I wouldn't be who I am. And who I am is someone who loved Charles, someone who raised a daughter, someone who spent 47 years building a life that mattered. I can't regret that. I won't." She stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him through the old leather jacket. "But if I could go back," she whispered, "I would tell that scared 25-year-old girl that leaving doesn't mean forgetting, that choosing someone doesn't mean losing yourself, and that the man she's walking away from will wait. He'll wait for 50 years, and he'll still be there when she's finally ready to come home." Arthur's eyes glistened. He didn't try to hide it. "Is that true?" he asked. "Would you tell her that?" "I just did." He pulled her into an embrace then, slow and careful and full of 50 years of wanting. She buried her face in the worn leather of his jacket and breathed him in paper and wood smoke and something deeper, something that had never changed. They stood like that for a long time. The sun climbed higher. The valley below them woke to another ordinary day, and on the porch of a remote mountain cabin, two old people held each other and finally let themselves believe that it wasn't too late when she finally pulled back. Ilara reached up and touched the collar of the jacket. The leather was soft beneath her fingers, worn smooth by decades of use. "You kept this all these years," she said. "I kept everything." She smiled. "I know." She turned toward the cabin, then stopped, looked back at him over her shoulder. "Arthur." "Yes, next weekend. I'll be here Friday afternoon. Bring more coffee." He nodded, and the smile on his face was the smile of a man who had finally stopped waiting. "I'll be here," he said. "I'll always be here." Laura walked back into the cabin to pack her things. Behind her, the mountain stretched toward the sky. Below her, the valley held the town where they had met, and around her, the morning light carried the promise of something new, something built on the foundation of everything old in the twilight of their lives. A widow had returned a worn jacket, and in returning it, she had finally found her way home. The porch light had been dead for 17 years. Ilara noticed it first. It's the way the glass fixture hung crooked against the cedar siding, cobwebs stitching the corners like careless embroidery. A small thing, the kind of detail most people would miss, but she had spent a lifetime noticing small things. The tilt of a horse's ear before a storm, the way morning light fell across an empty bed, the precise weight of silence when a house held only one person. She stood at the bottom of the steps and let her eyes travel upward. The cabin hadn't changed. Same weathered wood, same stone chimney climbing the east wall, same window to the left of the door where a lamp burned low against the coming dark. She had stood in this exact spot 50 years ago, a different woman in a different world. made a choice that carved her life in two. Now she was back. The evening air carried the bite of mountain cold. Late September in the high country meant winter was already circling, waiting for its moment. Ilara pulled her coat tighter and felt the weight in her hands, soft leather. Worn at the cuffs, the collar darkened from years of skin and sweat. She had kept it in a cedar chest beneath her bed for 5 decades. Through 2 presidents, through a marriage, through the birth of a daughter and the death of a husband, through every spring and winter of a life that had carried her far from this place. She had never shown it to anyone. The jacket felt different now, lighter somehow. Or maybe that was her. Maybe everything felt lighter when you were standing in the twilight of your life with nothing left to prove and no one left to impress. She looked at the door behind. It sat a man she had loved when love still meant something reckless and unfinished. A man who had written her letters for 2 years after she left, letters she burned without reading because reading them would have undone her. A man who had taken the raw material of that heartbreak and turned it into novels that made him famous. She had seen his face on the back of books in airport stores. She had watched interviews where he talked about loss and art and the woman who got away. Never knowing he was talking about her, she had never reached out. Not once until now. A letter arrived at her kitchen table 3 weeks ago. Not from Arthur, from a publisher. They were compiling a collection of his personal writings, journal entries, early drafts, and in his archives they had found something. A piece of paper folded into the pocket of a jacket described in detail, a jacket they believed might hold sentimental value to the woman named in the note. Would she be willing to confirm its authenticity? Ilara read the letter 3 times before she understood what it meant. Arthur had kept the jacket all these years, and inside it he had kept her. She wrote back the same day, not to confirm anything, to say she was coming. The porch steps groaned beneath her weight. Old wood, old memories. The sound carried in the mountain stillness, and she saw the curtain by the window shift just slightly, just enough. He knew she was here. Her hand hovered over the door. 50 years of silence pressed against her back. 50 years of mornings and evenings and moments that could have been different if she had been braver, or more foolish, or less certain that security mattered more than the way his hands felt in her hair. She had married a good man, a stable man, a man who built fences and balanced checkbooks and never once looked at her like she was the answer to a question he hadn't finished asking. She had loved him. She had, but love came in different languages, and she had spent her whole life speaking the wrong one. The door opened before she could knock. Arthur stood in the frame, and for a moment neither of them moved. He was thinner than she expected. The strong shoulders she remembered had softened, rounded by years of sitting at desks and staring at pages. His hair had gone completely white, wild and untrimmed, falling across a forehead etched with lines that looked like they had been carved by a blade. But his eyes, those were the same, dark and deep, and watching her like he was still trying to understand something she had never been able to explain. "You're here," he said. His voice was rougher. Age had scraped away some of its music, left something raw underneath. "I should have called. You should have many things." The words landed between them, not sharp exactly, but heavy, weighted with everything that hadn't been said for half a century. Ilara felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the urge to explain, to defend, to make him understand that she had done what she had to do. But she was too old for explanations now, too tired, and he wasn't asking for one anyway. She held out the jacket. He looked at it like he was looking at a ghost. For a long moment he didn't move. Then his hand reached out slow, uncertainly. His fingers brushed the leather. She watched his face change as the texture registered, as the familiar weight of it brought back whatever he had buried beneath all those books and all those years. "Where did you?" "I kept it." His eyes lifted to hers. Something passed between them that had no name. Something that had been waiting in the dark for 5 decades, patient as stone, waiting for this exact moment to wake up. He should come in, he said. It wasn't an invitation. It was a surrender. Ilara stepped past him into the cabin and felt the past close around her like water. The same stone fireplace, the same wooden beams, the same window overlooking the meadow where they used to lie in the grass and watch clouds shapeshift across the summer sky. But everything else had changed. Books covered every surface stacked on the floor, piled on chairs, spilling from shelves that couldn't contain them. Papers covered the table where he wrote. Coffee cups held dead insects and forgotten purposes. This was not a home. This was a fortress built by a man who had stopped letting the world side. Arthur closed the door and stood with his back against it, watching her take it in. The jacket hung from his hand like something fragile, like something that might break if he held it too tight. It's smaller than I remember, she said. The cabin, everything. He almost smiled. Almost. The corner of his mouth twitched in a way that reminded her of mornings and mistakes in the way he used to look at her, across a crowded room like they shared a secret. No one else could guess if you'd look the same. He said, liar. I said the same. Not young. The same. There's a difference. She moved toward the fireplace, running her hand along the mantel. Photographs stood in frames none of people, landscapes, mountains, a river at dawn, the places he had gone when he left this valley and never came back. She recognized some of them. Others were foreign, unknown, the geography of a life she had no part in. Why now? He asked a question hung in the air between them, simple, direct, the question she had been asking herself since she wrote that letter. Ilara turned to face him. The firelight caught the lines on her face, the gray in her hair, the tiredness around her eyes that no amount of rest could erase. She was 72 years old. She had buried a husband, raised a daughter, watched her own body soften and slow and remind her every morning that time was no longer a luxury she could afford. I'm old, she said, and I'm tired of carrying things alone. His hand tightened on the jacket, just slightly, just enough. You could have come back any time. No, I couldn't. The truth of it sat between them, heavy and undeniable. She couldn't have come back because coming back would have meant admitting she made a mistake. And she had spent 50 years refusing to admit that, refusing to look too closely at the life she built and wonder if the foundation was guilt instead of love. But her husband was gone now. Her daughter had her own family. The house she lived in felt like a museum of someone else's choices, and somewhere in the mountains, an old man with white hair had kept a jacket for 50 years because it still smelled like her. I should have read your letters, she said. Arthur's jaw tightened. I should have stopped writing them. Why didn't you? He crossed the room slowly, each step measured, deliberate. When he reached her, he stopped close enough that she could smell the wood smoke in his clothes, the paper and ink that had become his skin. He looked down at her with those dark eyes that had never stopped asking questions she couldn't answer. 'Cause writing them was the only way I could still talk to you. The jacket hung between them, worn and soft and heavy with everything they had never said. Ilara reached out and touched his hand where it held the leather. His fingers were thinner now, the knuckles swollen with age, but they were still the same hands that had once traced the shape of her face in moonlight. I don't know what I'm here for, she whispered. Arthur looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked down at the jacket, at the place where her hand covered his. Neither do I, he said, but it's getting dark, and the road down the mountain is dangerous at night. It wasn't an answer. It wasn't an invitation. It was a choice. And for the first time in 50 years, Ilara chose to stay. The fire had burned low by the time they settled into something that resembled comfort. Arthur moved through the cabin with the practiced ease of a man who had spent decades alone stoking embers adding wood, setting a kettle on the cast-iron stove without asking if she wanted tea. He knew she did. He had always known. That was the cruelty of loving someone who understood you completely. There was nowhere to hide. Ilara sat in a worn armchair by the fireplace. The same chair that had occupied that spot when she was 25 and certain of everything. The fabric had been replaced twice, maybe 3 times, but the frame was the same. She remembered the way Arthur used to pull her into his lap here, reading passages from whatever he was writing, asking if the words landed right. She remembered the sound of his voice in the dark. He returned with 2 mugs, handed her one without asking. Black coffee, 1 sugar, the same way she'd drunk it 50 years ago. "You remember?" she said. "I remember everything." The words carried weight she wasn't ready to examine. She wrapped her hands around the warm mug and stared into the fire, watching flames consume the wood Arthur had added. The cabin creaked around them, settling into night. Somewhere outside, an owl called once and fell silent. "How long have you lived here alone?" she asked. "Since I came back, after your mother passed." He nodded. The house was empty. I was empty. Seemed like the right fit. She glanced at the stacks of books, the papers, the general neglect of a space that hadn't seen another person in years. "You never married?" The question hung in the air longer than it should have. "No." "Why not?" Arthur took a long drink of his coffee before answering. When he looked at her, his eyes held something ancient and unguarded, the look of a man who had stopped performing for the world because the world had stopped watching. "I measured every woman against you. It wasn't fair to them. Eventually, I stopped trying." Ilara felt the words land in her chest like stones. She wanted to look away. She wanted to deflect with humor or change the subject or do any of the things she had spent a lifetime doing to avoid the weight of her own choices. But she was too old for that now, too tired, and he deserved better. "You shouldn't have." "I didn't have a choice." He set his mug on the hearth and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands hanging loose between them. "That's what I tried to explain in the letters you never read. Love isn't a decision. It's a recognition. I recognized you the first moment I saw you in that diner, and I never stopped." The diner. She remembered. A small place on the edge of town where she worked the counter for tips. He had come in with a notebook and an empty stomach, ordered coffee, and sat for 3 hours, writing. She had asked what he was working on. He had looked up at her like she was the first person who had ever asked him a real question. She was 19. He was 20-2.4 years later. She walked away. "Arthur, wait." He held up a hand, stopping her. "Before you say anything, before we do whatever this is, I need you to understand something." She waited. He stood and moved to the window, looking out at the darkness. His reflection ghosted in the glass, an old man superimposed on a black mountain night. "I wrote about you," he said. "Every book, every story, every character who ever loved something they couldn't keep. That was you. That was always you." The critics called it a theme. They wrote essays about my obsession with loss, my understanding of grief. They had no idea I was just writing the same woman over and over, trying to understand why she left. Behind her, the fire popped and settled. "I built a career on the wreckage of us." Lara set her mug down. Her hands were shaking slightly, though she couldn't feel them. All sensation had concentrated in her chest, where something old and dormant was waking up and demanding to be felt. "You could have found me," she said, "after you became successful, after you had money and fame and all the things I told you you'd never have. You could have come." He turned from the window and said, "What?" "Look what you missed. I was right all along." He shook his head slowly. "That's not love, Ilara. That's revenge. And I loved you too much for revenge." "Then why the letters? Why keep writing after I stopped answering?" "Because I needed you to know that I would have waited." His voice cracked on the last word just slightly. just enough to reveal the boy still living inside the old man. I would have waited forever. But you didn't ask me to. You just decided that I wasn't enough. Causation landed. Not sharp, not cruel, just true. In truth, she was learning, cut deeper than any blade. She stood, needing to move, needing to escape the weight of his gaze. The cabin was small, but she paced it anyway, her footsteps hollow on the wooden floor. Past the table where he wrote, past the stacks of books she now understood were monuments to her absence, past the window where he stood, still watching, still waiting for answers she wasn't sure she had. You don't know what it was like, she said finally, growing up on that ranch, watching my mother work herself into the ground while my father drank away every dollar my grandfather left us. I knew what poverty looked like. I knew what it did to people. Two women. She stopped at the fireplace, gripping the mantle like it might steady her. You had nothing, Arthur. Nothing but words and dreams and a notebook full of stories no one would publish. And I loved you. God help me. I loved you so much it scared me. But love doesn't pay bills. Love doesn't keep the cold out. I watched my mother die at 53 because she couldn't afford the doctor. Do you understand what that does to a person? His voice came from behind her, soft and broken. I would have given you everything. You had nothing to give. I had me. Was that not enough? She turned. He was closer than she expected, close enough that she could see the wetness in his eyes. The way his jaw worked against emotions he had spent 50 years learning to control. Was I not enough? He asked again. The question stripped her bare, not because it was unfair, but because it was fair. Because she had asked herself the same thing 1,000 times in the dark of night, lying next to a husband who loved her faithfully and completely, wondering why she still felt hungry. You were everything, she whispered. That was the problem. He waited. You made me feel too much, hope too much, want too much. And I was so afraid of losing you that I convinced myself it was safer to lose you on purpose than to watch it happen by accident. Her voice broke. I was a coward. I was 25 years old, and I was so terrified of being broken that I broke us both. The confession hung between them, raw and bleeding and 50 years too late. Arthur reached out. His hand hovered near her face, not quite touching, asking permission the way he always had. The way he never assumed he deserved. She turned her cheek into his palm and felt the warmth of him, the reality of skin against skin after half a century of absence. I would have waited forever, he said again. This time it wasn't an accusation. It was a gift. I know. You should have trusted me. I know. Could have had. I know. She pulled back slightly, just enough to look at him. At the lines time had carved, at the white hair and tired eyes in the shape of a man who had spent his whole life loving a ghost. Charles was a good man, she said. He never raised his voice, never forgot an anniversary, never looked at another woman. We built a life, a stable, predictable, comfortable life, and I spent every day of it wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to stay. Arthur's hand fell from her face. He stepped back, giving her space, giving her room to breathe. Did you love him? The question mattered. She could hear it in his voice, not jealousy, but something deeper. A need to understand the shape of the life she chose instead of him. Yes, she said it without hesitation. Not the way I loved you. But yes, I loved him. He deserved that much. Arthur nodded slowly, processing, accepting. The fire crackled between them, filling the silence with something that wasn't quite comfort, but wasn't quite pain either. Tell me about her, Ilara said. Him? I had a son. She blinked. You adopted. When I was 43. A boy from the city who needed someone to believe in him. He's grown now. Lives in Oregon with his family. We talk once a month, sometimes less. Arthur's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. I wasn't a great father. Too much time in my own head. Too much history. I couldn't explain. But I tried. For him, I tried. Lara felt something loosen in her chest. Relief, maybe, that he hadn't been completely alone. That someone had known this version of him, the softer version, the one who tried. I'm glad, she said, that you had someone. Tears my mother's eyes. In your stubbornness, her breath caught. You told him about me. I told him everything. He's the only person who knows the real story. The letters, the jacket, the woman who got away. Arthur's voice dropped lower. He's the one who told me to burn it all. Move on. Let go. Why didn't you? Arthur looked at her for a long moment. Then he walked to the chair where he draped the jacket and picked it up, holding it like something sacred, 'cause letting go of you would. I've been letting go of the only thing that ever made me feel alive. Lead tears of grief, or the controlled tears of sentiment. These came from somewhere deeper, somewhere she had sealed off long ago and forgotten existed. They ran down her face hot and fast, and she couldn't wipe them away fast enough. Arthur reached out. His thumb traced the line of her cheek, catching tears, following the path they made. I'm old, she whispered. So am I. I made terrible choices. So did I. I stayed alone. I let bitterness become my art. I pushed away everyone who tried to love me because they weren't you. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. Outside, the storm reached a new pitch. Wind screamed around the cabin's corners. Rain found gaps in the window frames, dripping onto the sills. Somewhere in the distance, a tree cracked and fell. And in the firelight, two old people sat on the floor and held each other's gaze and admitted that they had no idea what came next. The lights flickered back on. For a moment, they both froze, caught in the sudden brightness. The lamp on the table seemed almost ridiculous now, its small flame overwhelmed by the electric bulbs overhead. Lara felt exposed, seen. The tears on her face felt like evidence of something she wasn't ready to name. Arthur stood first. He offered her his hand, helped her up. They stood, facing each other in the harsh electric light. And for the first time she saw him, clearly not the memory, not the ghost, but the man. The deep lines around his mouth, the slight stoop in his shoulders, the way his left hand trembled slightly, the way old hands do. I should check the generator, he said. Make sure it holds. Arthur. He stopped. I don't want to be alone tonight. The words hung between them. Simple, honest, terrifying. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once, slowly, and moved to the couch. He sat at one end, leaving the other empty. An invitation. A choice. Lara crossed the room and sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him through the layers of old clothes and older grief. The storm raged on. Neither of them spoke. And somewhere in the darkness of the mountain, two people who had spent 50 years apart finally stopped running. The lights held for 20 minutes. Then they died again, this time for good. Arthur checked the generator twice before admitting defeat. Something electrical, he explained. Beyond his limited skills, they would have to wait out the storm with kerosene and firelight and whatever patience. Too old. People could muster. ELARA. Didn't mind the dark. There was something liberating about it, the way it erased the evidence of time, the way it made them both just voices and warmth and presence. In the darkness, she could pretend they were young again. In the darkness, she could forget the 50 years that separated who they were from who they had been. They sat on the couch, closer now. The fire had settled into a steady glow, casting just enough light to see the outlines of things. Arthur's profile, the curve of his shoulder, the way his hands rested on his knees, still and patient. I should tell you something, he said. His voice carried a weight she hadn't heard before. Something careful, something that had been waiting for the right moment. I'm listening. He was quiet for a long time, long enough that she began to think he had changed his mind. But then he spoke, and the words came slow and deliberate, like stones placed one by one. I wrote you a letter every day for 2 years. You know that. What you don't know is what was in them. Lara's heart tightened. Arthur, let me finish. Please. I've carried this for 50 years, and I need you to hear it. Just once. She nodded, though he probably couldn't see it. He spoke anyway. The first letters were angry, furious. I called you every name I could think of. I told you that you were a coward and a fool, and that you'd regret your choice every day for the rest of your life. He paused. I mailed those. All of them. Every cruel word. I never read them. I know. I'm grateful now. At the time, your silence felt like another rejection. But years later, I realized you spared me something. You spared me the shame of having my worst self preserved in your memory. The fire popped. A log shifted, sending sparks up the chimney. The letters changed after the first 6 months. The anger burned out. What was left was just missing you. I wrote about small things. The way the light hit the meadow in the morning. A book I read that I thought you'd like. Questions I wished I could ask you about your day. His voice softened. Those were the ones I hoped you'd answer. The gentle ones. The ones that said I still loved you without conditions. Lara felt tears threatening again. She pressed her lips together, held them back. You never answered. And eventually, I stopped writing. But I never stopped wondering. Every success, every failure, every ordinary day, wondered what you would say about it. I wondered if you were happy. I wondered if you ever thought of me. Every day, she whispered. He turned toward her. Even in the darkness, she could feel his gaze. What? Every day, Arthur. I thought of you every day. The words came faster now, tumbling out before she could stop them. Not in a way that ruined my life. Not in a way that kept me from loving Charles or raising our daughter. But in the margins, in the quiet moments, in the space between sleeping and waking. You were always there. She felt him shift closer. I kept track of your books. I knew when each one came out. I bought them all, read them all, hid them in a box in my closet where Charles wouldn't find them. I highlighted passages that felt like they were written for me. I wrote notes in the margins like I was talking back to you. Lara, I know how pathetic it sounds. A married woman carrying a torch for a man she left decades ago. But I couldn't stop. You were in my blood. You were in my bones. I tried to cut you out, and I just couldn't. Silence filled the space between them, heavy and full and alive with everything they had never said. Then Arthur spoke, and his voice was different, softer, younger. I'd never married because I couldn't stop measuring. Every woman I met, I'd watch for signs of you. The way you tilted your head when you were thinking. The sound of your laugh when something really surprised you. The way you said my name like it meant something. He paused. No one ever said my name like that again. Arthur, I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you because I need you to understand the full weight of what you've meant. Not the fantasy, not the memory, the reality. He turned to face her fully. You've ruined me for anyone else, and I let you, because being ruined by you felt better than being whole with someone who wasn't you. The words hit her like a physical force. She felt them in her chest, in her throat, in the places she had kept locked for 50 years. That's not healthy, she managed. Okay, I know. That's not love. That's obsession. I know. She wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him he should have moved on. Should have found someone. Should have built a real life instead of a monument to her absence. But the words died in her throat because she knew that she had done the same thing. Different circumstances, different choices, but the same fundamental truth. She had never stopped loving him. She had just gotten better at hiding it. You asked me why I came back, she said. the real reason, the whole truth. He waited. Charles knew. The words landed in the darkness. Arthur went very still beside her. The last year of his life, he found the box. My box. The one with your books and my notes and the letters I never sent because I was too scared to write them. She swallowed hard. He didn't get angry. That wasn't Charles. He just looked at me with this terrible sadness and asked who Arthur was. What did you tell him? The truth. That you were the man I loved before him. That I had chosen him, chosen our life, chosen everything we built together. But that some part of me never stopped wondering. Arthur's hand found hers in the darkness. She let it. He held my hand, just like the sand. He said the most beautiful and terrible thing anyone has ever said to me. Her voice cracked. He said, I always knew I was your second choice. I just hoped that eventually I'd become your first. The tears came then. She couldn't stop them. 50 years of guilt and grief and complicated love poured out of her in the darkness. While the storm raged outside and an old man held her hand and listened. I can't, she whispered. I loved him. I truly did. But I failed him. Because he deserved someone who didn't have a ghost in their heart. And I couldn't be that person. I tried. Every day. I tried. But you were always there. Arthur squeezed her hand. Just once. Just enough. He knew, Arthur said softly. He knew, and he stayed anyway. That's not failure, Alara. That's grace. He gave you the greatest gift one person can give another. He loved you exactly as you were, including the parts of you that belonged to someone else. Kay, she looked at him through her tears. Even in the darkness, she could see the shape of him, the reality of him, the man who had waited 50 years without knowing if she would ever come. How do you know that? Because I would have done the same thing. His voice was steady, certain. If you had chosen me and told me part of you still loved him, I would have stayed. I would have stayed forever. Because having part of you is better than having none of you. That's what real love is. It's not possession. It's acceptance. The words broke something open in her. Something she had known was still sealed. I don't deserve. Stop. He said it gently but firmly. No more of that. No more deciding what you deserve. You're here. I'm here. We're alive. That's all that matters. Outside, the storm began to ease. The wind still howled, but the rain had softened to a steady drumming. The worst had passed. Inside, two people sat in the darkness and held hands and let 50 years of silence finally break. I have something to show you, Arthur said. He stood, pulling her gently to her feet. She followed him through the dark cabin, past the dying fire, past the stacks of books, to a small room she hadn't seen before. His study. He lit a single candle on his desk. The flame revealed shelves of books in every language, every edition. And on the wall above the desk, a single photograph. It was her, young and laughing, caught in a moment of pure joy. She remembered that day, a picnic by the river, summer, the year before she left. You kept this. I kept everything. He opened a drawer and pulled out a box. Not the kind of box that held secrets. This one was worn, handled, opened 1,000 times. He placed it on the desk and lifted the lid. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to her, all unsealed. I stopped mailing them after the first 2 years, but I never stopped writing. He looked at her, and in the candlelight, she saw something she hadn't seen before. Not the old man, not the famous author, but the boy she had loved, the boy who had never stopped loving her. I wrote to you every year on your birthday, every year on the day we met, every time something happened that I wished I could share with you. She reached into the box with trembling hands, pulled out the top letter. The date was from 3 months ago. Read it, he said. If you want. She unfolded the paper. The handwriting was shakier than she remembered, but unmistakably his dot, Dear Ilara, today I turned 74. Another year without you. Another year of wondering if you're still alive, still happy, still somewhere in the world breathing the same air I breathe. I don't know why I still write these letters. I don't know why I keep them instead of burning them. Maybe because burning them would feel like burning the only proof I have that you were real. I dreamed about you last night. You were young again, and I was young, and we were lying in the meadow watching clouds. You asked me what I was thinking. I said nothing. Everything you. You laughed at that laugh, the one that always made me feel like the luckiest man alive. Then I woke up, and you weren't there. And I remembered that you haven't been there for 50 years. I don't blame you anymore. I don't know if I ever really did. I just miss you. I miss you in my bones, in my blood, in the spaces between words when I'm trying to write. I miss the future we should have had. If you're still out there, Laura, I hope you're happy. I hope you're loved. I hope someone holds you the way I would have held you if you'd let me, and if by some miracle you ever read this, I'm still here. I never left. Always. Arthur, the letter shook in her hands. She looked up at him, at the man who had written these words 3 months ago, never knowing she would read them. I'm here, she whispered. I'm here now. Arthur reached out and cupped her face in his hands. His thumbs brushed away tears she hadn't noticed falling. I know, he said. That's all I ever needed. And in the candlelight, in the aftermath of the storm, in the twilight of their lives too, people who had spent 50 years apart finally found their way home. Dawn broke over the mountain like a slow revelation. Ilara woke to light she didn't recognize, soft and golden. Nothing like the harsh morning sun that flooded her bedroom back home. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then the events of the night returned in fragments. The storm, the letters, the candlelight, the way Arthur had held her face like she was something precious. She was on the couch. A blanket covered her, one she didn't remember pulling over herself. Arthur must have done it while she slept. She sat up slowly, her body protesting the unfamiliar position. The cabin was quiet. The fire had died to embers, gray and glowing. Through the window, she could see the aftermath of the storm-broken branches, standing water, but also light, clean light, the kind that only came after rain. Arthur wasn't in the main room. She found him on the porch. He stood at the railing, looking out at the valley below. The storm had cleared the air completely. She could see for miles the curve of the river, the patchwork of fields, the distant smudge of the town where they had met 55 years ago. Arthur held a mug of coffee, steam rising in the cold morning air. He wore the jacket, the worn leather jacket she had returned the night before. He must have heard her approach, 'cause he turned before she could speak. His eyes were soft in the morning light, softer than she had ever seen them. The years seemed to have retreated somehow, leaving behind something quieter, something at peace. You're up, he said. Coffee's inside. Kettle's still hot. She didn't move toward the door. Instead, she crossed the porch and stood beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Together, they looked out at the valley, at the world waking below them, at the ordinary beauty of a morning that felt like anything but ordinary. I used to imagine this, Arthur said, waking up to find you here, watching the sun come up together. He glanced at her, a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. In my imagination, we were younger. Laura laughed. It surprised her, the sound, the lightness of it. She couldn't remember the last time she had laughed like that. In my imagination, I'd had more sleep. He smiled fully then, really smiled, and she saw in that smile the boy she had loved, still alive beneath the years. I read more of the letters, she said, while you were out here. I hope that's okay. He nodded. They're yours. They always were. She thought about what she had read. Decades of devotion spread across yellowed paper, birthday wishes, Christmas memories, pages where he tried to capture the exact shade of a sunset and admitted it was pointless, because She should have been there to see it herself. Years and years of a man loving a woman who wasn't there. I don't know what to do with all of it, she admitted. The weight of what you felt. What you still feel. It's too much. Yes. He turned to face her fully. The jacket creaked softly with the movement told leather. Well loved, shaped to his body after all these years. It's not too much, he said. It's just what happened. I'm not asking you to carry it. I'm not asking you to feel the same way or make up for lost time or turn this into something it can't be. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. I just wanted you to know. That's all I ever wanted. For you to know that you were loved completely, exactly as you were, for your whole life. Even when you weren't here. The tears came again. She was starting to think they might never stop. I don't know what I am anymore, she whispered. I was someone's wife for 47 years. I was someone's mother. I was someone's daughter until my parents died. But I don't know who I am. Just me. Just Ilara. Arthur reached out and took her hand. His fingers were cold from the morning air, but they wrapped around hers with a certainty that warmed her from the inside. Then we find out together. She looked at him, really looked, at the white hair and tired eyes in the jacket that had waited 50 years to be worn again, at the man who had built a life around her absence and somehow kept room for her anyway. What are you asking me? I'm not asking anything. His voice was gentle, patient. I'm offering something, a chance, not to go back, but to go forward, together, for whatever time we have left. The words hung in the cold morning air, simple, terrifying, beautiful. I have a life back home, she said. A house, friends, a daughter who calls every Sunday. I know, can't just, I know. She fell silent, staring out at the valley, the town where they met, the river where they used to swim, the road that led away from this place. It's the same road she had driven down 50 years ago, with the tears in her eyes and certainty in her heart. She had been so sure then, so absolutely certain that she was making the right choice. Now she wasn't sure of anything. I don't want to lose myself again, she said finally. I spent my whole marriage being what someone else needed. I don't want to do that anymore. Arthur squeezed her hand. Then don't. I don't need you to be anything. I just want you to be here. She turned to him. Here, in this cabin, on this mountain. Here. He touched his chest, right over his heart. Here, wherever that is, however that looks. I've spent 50 years loving you from a distance. I can do it for whatever time we have left. But I'd rather do it close. I'd rather watch the sun rise with you. I'd rather make you coffee in the morning and argue about books and sit in comfortable silence. When there's nothing left to say, that's a lot of romance for an old man. He grinned. A real grin, the kind she remembered from when they were young and stupid and thought love could conquer everything. I'm a writer. Romance is my business. She laughed again. It felt good. It felt like coming home. Behind them, the cabin door creaked open. They both turned, but no one was there. Just the wind, playing tricks. Just the mountain, reminding them that time moved differently up here. Ilara looked at the door, then at Arthur, then back at the valley below. I can't stay today, she said. I have things to handle, a house to deal with, conversations to have with my daughter that I've been avoiding for years. Arthur nodded. He didn't look disappointed. He looked like a man who had waited 50 years and could wait a little longer. But I can come back, she continued, next week, for the weekend, and we can figure out what this looks like, slowly, carefully, without losing ourselves.